Hello and welcome to this video presentation on job analysis. Job analysis is an industrial psychology endeavor that's not really that well known to most lay people, so let's start by talking about what it is in broad terms. Organizations constantly need to recruit and hire new employees, and then once the new employees are on the job, there's training and eventually regular performance reviews, so either an annual or semi-annual performance appraisal. All of these things really do depend on having a good idea of what the job actually entails and what skills it requires. And while we could just go with our gut, companies are usually better off systematically learning about the jobs that they will be staffing, and this is a process called job analysis. So the basic idea is that you can do all of these things better: recruiting, hiring, training, evaluating performance, if you understand the job and its requirements well. You can find the right tests and interview questions for hiring. You can tailor the training to focus on the skills that new employees will need to have, and so on. You'll just know what you need when you know what the job is and what it entails. So, how do we do it? There are two approaches to conducting a job analysis. The first one is called task-oriented, and it focuses primarily on the duties and the tasks involved. I'm going to focus on what the employee is doing during a given day. And in addition to getting a list of duties and tasks, it's also going to generate for us a sense of the frequency of those tasks. Some things on your job you may do every hour or every day. Other things may be much more rare. The second approach is called worker-oriented job analysis, and this doesn't focus so much on what you're doing as it does on what you need to do your job, what characteristics are necessary to perform well. And we use the acronym KSAO to break down worker characteristics into these four things. It used to be just KSA. O was added to more fully encapsulate all the different things that could influence worker performance. So first we have K, which is knowledge. That refers to sets of principles and facts for a subject area. For somebody who fixes bicycles, knowing the mechanics of a bicycle is really important, so that would be a knowledge area. Second, are skills, which are things that you've learned how to do. These are not innate, not things that people know naturally how to do. They're things that through training, experience, and practice that you've learned how to do. Shooting a three-point basket, or engaging in negotiation, or operating machinery are all things that you learn how to do. Abilities are different from skills in that they're broader, and they're a little bit more raw competencies that people have certain levels of. So while you might be able to improve your ability in one area, it's not a skill. It's not something that you learn how to do. It's something that you have a certain amount of. So these are thought of as a little bit more static and stable. You use your abilities to learn specific skills, so the abilities are broad and the skills are very specific. So examples of abilities might be good hearing, good hand-eye coordination, being very fluent with numbers. Those things can then be applied to learning areas of knowledge or skills. So it's an important distinction that the abilities are the broad, natural talents that people have, and the skills are the specific things that people learn how to do based on those abilities. We've more recently added other qualities that affect performance, such as personality traits like extroversion, interests like being particularly interested in work that requires dealing with other people, preferences, values, and styles, things like that. After learning about these KSAOs, we'll also want to know which ones are most important, because you might have a list of KSAOs for a given job, but some of them are more crucial than others. We'll also be interested in which KSAOs are required at the time that a person is hired versus those that are not required at that time. This is very useful to know when deciding what to look for in applicants versus KSAOs that can be trained once new employees are on the job. For example, skills and knowledge areas are a little bit easier to train people on than abilities or other qualities such as personality. So let's take a look at an example of somebody who inspects fireworks. We would see a different set of outcomes based on whether we took a task-oriented or a KSAO or worker-oriented approach. So what sorts of tasks does somebody who is a fireworks inspector do? Well, they would inspect and test assembled pyrotechnics. That makes sense. Examine the parts for defects, reject or discard those that don't meet specifications, and then mark items with details such as, if they're a certain grade or whether they've been accepted or rejected. What do you need to be able to do that? What would the worker-oriented approach tell us? Well, they would probably have to have some knowledge of how fireworks are actually built and, the different components and so forth. As for skills, they would have to be skilled in determining whether something is of high quality or low quality. They would have to have good vision, probably good with their hands, and being able to apply general principles to specific situations or deductive reasoning. And then other qualities, they probably have to be willing to wear protective equipment, deal with high noise levels. If fireworks go off, they're likely to be pretty noisy. So this shows us the distinction between a task-oriented and a worker-oriented approach. So now that we have a sense of the different approaches that you can take, and by the way, since both are useful, knowing what a worker's day will be comprised of and knowing what they need to have to do their job, it's usually a good idea to take both approaches simultaneously, not one over the other. So how would you go ahead and learn about your job? Where are you going to get the information from? Well, take a second to think about either your current job or your most recent job. How might your organization go about gathering information about the tasks that are involved and or the KSAOs that are required? Where might they go to get that information? Now, there's a good chance that you came up with the idea that they should talk to the people who have experience with this job in one way or another. That makes a lot of sense. These are people that we would call subject matter experts, or SMEs. By the way, a side note that you're going to see that IO psychologists love acronyms. We have KSAOs and we have SMEs, and so we've come across two so far. And that doesn't even count the phrase IO psychologist. See, it's even in our name. So who counts as a subject matter expert? Now, probably the most obvious people to talk to would be the people who actually do the job. So those we could refer to as job incumbents. But there are other people as well. You might ask supervisors, people managing those who do the job. And often these folks have been incumbents in the past, so in addition to seeing the job from their supervisory position, they're also likely to have experience in that job in the past, or they may have experience in that job in the past. Incumbents and supervisors can provide information about the job verbally through interviews or via questionnaires, which could be either paper and pencil or computer-based. There's a third group you might not be aware of, and that is job analysts. Yes, that's right, you can spend your career learning about other people's careers. In addition to collecting data from incumbents and supervisors, job analysts also occasionally spend some time trying the job themselves or observing workers doing their job, though of course they're not permanent employees. And whether or not they actually do the job themselves to learn about it probably depends on the job. We probably don't want them trying their hand at being a pilot or a surgeon. Does this job sound fun to you? Well, you might be surprised, but job analysis is something that's much more fun to do than to talk or read about. So it's something that people who do it say that they actually enjoy the experience of learning about other people's work quite a bit. So what would be the strengths and weaknesses of each source? Well, job incumbents are the ones who are in there doing the job in the trenches on a daily basis, and so they're the closest to the job, and so it makes sense to talk to them. Whereas supervisors know the big picture, they know how that job relates to other jobs or to broader organizational goals. Job analysts, however, since their career is learning about other people's work, they probably are very good at identifying how much a job requires certain things relative to other jobs that they've seen. So making comparisons between the job they're focusing on and other jobs in the world of work. In addition to people, there are other sources of information that might be useful, but most of these aren't complete enough to stand on their own. They might be a good starting point, but may not match the job at that company at that particular time. First thing that we could do is look at an existing job description that might be in the records at the Human Resources Department, Personnel Department. This job description might be from a past job analysis, but it might even be more likely that somebody just spent 15 minutes and wrote it up. These are often very brief and sometimes are laughably out of date because they don't get updated very often, so they should be taken with a grain of salt.